Greetings to all our learners. Welcome to CEC lecture. Dear learners, the topic of analysis is New International Economic Order, abbreviated as NIEO. The lecture shall be of huge significance for the learners from the discipline of political science, international relations, international business, and also learners preparing for competitive examinations, higher studies, research, amongst others. In this lecture, we shall try to understand the dynamics of global trade. What were the issues that led to the emergence of the ideas that are enshrined with new international economic order? We shall also try to look at from the institutional perspective, namely glimpses into insights from evolution from GATT to WTO, UNCTAD, G77, amongst others. The lecture shall present an analysis of the aims and objectives of new international economic order. The lecture shall also highlight dynamics and other institutional apparatus involved in the global trade rules, wherein ideas of NIEO, New International Economic Order, are being resonated again and again. We shall look at important trade theories and also the structure and functioning of global governance mechanisms which have a bearing with respect to ideas enshrined in New International Economic Order. At the 6th special session of the United Nations General Assembly in 1975, there was a declaration that made for the establishment of new international economic order. Various academic debates, various commentators have called it as a turning point in the evolution of the international community, as well as debates that were there with respect to global trade, international economic relations, amongst others. The basis for NIEO is constituted by United Nations resolution in 1971 in the 7th special session, that is on development and international economic cooperation. The new international economic order was set as a set of proposals put forward during the 1970s by some developing countries through United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, with the aim to promote their interests by improving their terms of trade, increasing development assistance, developed country tariff reductions, and other means. This also implied revision of the international economic system in favor of the third world countries, thereby replacing the Bretton Woods system, which critics argued had only benefited few countries or perhaps leading states that created it. The term New International Economic Order was derived from the Declaration for the Establishment of New International Economic Order adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1974 and referred to a wide range of trade, financial, commodity, debt-related issues. Reading from the Declaration on 1st May 1974, A/RES/S6/3201 from UN Archives. Further, the agenda for discussions between industrial and developing countries, focusing on restructuring a world's economy to permit greater participation by and benefits to developing countries, also known as the North-South Dialogue. The declaration, that was a program of action and a charter of economic rights and duties of the states. Once again, quoting from UN sources, these were also adopted. Now, why was there a call for new international economic order. We can trace two important perspectives here. Firstly, the deficiencies in the international economic order. And the second point is related to the first one, wherein that was the failure of the GATT rounds and UNCTAD in fulfillment of their objectives. And here the word objectives has to be seen with reference to the issue of North-South divide, the issue of North-South cooperation, the issue of exploitation of resources by North for its development from the South. So, asymmetric international economic order, over-dependence of the South on the North were some of the important aspects wherein there was a call for keeping those aspects into consideration. There was a call for NIEO. Dear learners, we have to also see that the new international economic order in the same line called for concessional financial resources to developing countries that must be increased substantially, and their flow may be made predictable, continuous and increasingly assured in order to facilitate the implementation by developing countries of long-term programs for economic and social development. It emphasized global interdependence. It called for radical changes in allied social, economic, political, institutional aspects of international relations. NIEO, New International Economic Orders, the ideas that we just saw, they can be also traced to the Afro-Asian conference that were held at Bandung in 1955, also at the Algiers Conference of Non-Aligned Countries in 1973. Reading from this very important article, that is the Bandung Conference in an era of unipolar liberal globalization and movements towards a multipolar politics. That is the Bandung Conference of 1955 in Indonesia. It did set up the motion for new international cooperation between Africa and Asia during the colonial and post-colonial eras. It pointed out that there is a need to address issues about economic cooperation, self-determination, decolonization and peace. Dear learners, the origin of North-South dialogue and the need for new international order, we saw that how at the Afro-Asian Conference in Bandung that was held in 1955, the echoes were made there. But the formal idea of NIEO was put forward at the Algiers Conference of Non-Aligned Countries in 1973. The fifth summit of non-aligned movement that was held at Colombo, Sri Lanka, that NAM countries issued a unanimous declaration calling for new international economic order on August 19, 1976. Reading from the Colombo Resolution, that is the Colombo Resolution declared, and we quote from there, institution of a new international financial order is of highest political importance. The resolution also declared that there must be devolution of the economic problems of the developing countries and demanded establishment of a universal and equitable new monetary system. It also called for restructuring international economic relations and also called for institution of new world economic order that will put the developing countries in a position to attain an acceptable level of development. The concept of new international economic order, one must also understand that even in the work of dependency theory, as we get to hear from and read from the remarks and work of Rolf Prebisch and some other economists in 1950s and 1960s, wherein looking at the United Nations Commission for Latin America also pointed out that how the development of the developed countries was done at the base of unequal terms of trade that were there, which was caused by exploitation of the periphery if we take the world system model. Another related perspective as we try to look at the idea of new international economic order, one gets to read from the Willy Brandt Commission. The task of Willy Brandt Commission was to review issues of international economic development. The Willy Brandt Commission was an independent commission on international development issues. It was chaired by Willy Brandt, former Chancellor of West Germany in 1980s, which widely this is referred as the Brandt Report. Now, this report, which was entitled as North-South, a program for survival, ways for nations to reduce economic disparities between the rich North and developing South. Now, in this report, if we read from sharing.org, that is, cooperation was the tool to create the change and facilitate worldwide growth and development as the main objective of development, being leading that must lead to self-fulfillment and creative partnership in the use of nations' productive forces and full human potential. To enforce one nation's model of development onto another, as the report said, was deemed unnecessary. So, in the same line, in the similar vein, the objectives of new international economic order was to strive for more equitable allocation of world's resources through increased flow of aid from the rich countries to the poor countries. It aimed to provide poor nations increased participation and have their say in the decision making process. Further, what were the mechanisms to really work out more voice to the unheard, poor, underdeveloped countries in global trade system? The mechanisms to do it was, that is, restructuring the monetary system, more rapid economic development of the poor countries, increase their share in world's trade with favorable terms of trade. So, therefore, the main tenets, the main principle of new international economic order have been that international trade should be based on the need to ensure stable, equitable, remunerative prices for raw materials, generalized non-reciprocal and non-discriminatory tariff preferences, as well as transfer of technology to developing countries. Thomas Friedman's work, World is Flat, it segments human history into certain phases, wherein from 1492 to 1800, it was the era where nations dominated global expansion. From 1800 to 2000, it was how multinational companies ascended and pushed global development, and 2000 to present, wherein how technology is driving globalization. Dear learners, Industry 4.0 is one of the major drivers of fourth industrial revolution. The first industrial revolution was triggered by water, steam power to move human labor to mechanical manufacturing. The second industrial revolution was built on electric power to create mass production. The third used electronics and information technology to automate manufacturing. The fourth industrial revolution is the current trend of automation and data exchange in manufacturing technologies. So, once again, why we are referring to this perspective? Because these ideas that are there with respect to NIEO are equally important for analysis with respect to contemporary development with respect to dimensions of trade and development. Reading from this very important summary note, that is Trade and Development Board, Investment, Enterprise and Development Commission, the 11th session at Geneva, November 2009, Structural Transformation, Industry 4.0 and Inequality, Science, Technology and Innovation Policy Challenges. This is the note presented by UN Secretariat. That is, Industry 4.0 is driven by frontier technologies such as artificial intelligence, robotics. They may change the rules of the game for countries embarking on a path of industrialization. As workers are displaced from low productivity sectors, higher automation may reduce the opportunities for them to find decent jobs and may put downward pressure on wages. Quoting further from this UNCTAD summary statement, that is that this may be accentuated by higher levels of market concentration that are becoming visible in digital industries. As a result, benefits of any productivity increase may accrue the owners of only few firms, and income distribution may become skewed to levels incompatible and with social stability. So, what we see here is that how today the idea of NEO, namely, is all the more relevant with respect to rise of new dimensions of Industry 4.0, new aspect of industrial revolution, wherein with respect to digital penetration, digital divide, research and development, there are thought process that whether will it place the developed world at a unequal platform with respect to the developing world. Further, taking input from a very important reference work by Vinod K. Agarwal and Steve Weber, that is the new international economic order. This is from very important international blog that we read, that is the new international economic order. Now, this perspective coming from this work is that emerging markets, when we look at the scenario of management of volatile commodity markets, looking at preferential trade access to rich country markets, greater stability and the need for it in exchange rates, greater aid to least developing countries, all of it, regulation of multinational corporations, all of it requires that one must look at the complexity of present day trade issues. This requires considerable turn from the perspective of Washington consensus and towards moving a highly managed system favoring preferential terms for developing countries and redistribution over competition and efficiency. An important work that we take reference to in our understanding on new international economic order, this work is by Erwin Lazio, Robert Baker and Elliot Eisenberg, that is the objectives of the new international economic order 2017. Now, this work tells us that the role of new international economic order in the resolution of issues in world economy, in international trade, economic policies, trade relations, business practices, in all of it, it has an important role to play. Further, there is a need to renegotiate the debts of developing countries, attaining United Nations development assistance targets, using funds from disarmament for development, all of it include discussion as we go by various pages in this book, that there are discussions on economic policies of developed countries to facilitate the expansion and diversification of the exports of developing countries, the need for improving and intensifying trade relations between countries, and above all having different social economic systems, increasing the transfer of resources through the World Bank and the IMF. All these important issues are discussed in this very important book, and it has a bearing with respect to increasing our knowledge horizons, that how ideas that were there with the concept of new international economic order, they have a bearing with respect to dynamics and various dimensions of present day global trade and development, international economic relations. Another important book by P.N. Agrawala, that is the new international economic order and overview. This work by P.N. Agrawal points out that how discussions, it points on policies and practices of nationalization, asymmetries, dependency of developing countries in the social science subsystem, and the renegotiation of the third world debt, appropriate adjustments at international trade. The book also reviews some of the positions of United States, Canada, Africa, Middle East with respect to the concept of new international economic order. Now, as we are trying to understand that how NIEO is all the more relevant today, we must see that the international global trade apparatus has come a long way from GATT rounds to WTO. Now, World Trade Organization is just not about GATT transformed into formal international organization. WTO has a broad area, it has a proper institutional structure. The issues of developing countries with respect to that how WTO agreements are lengthy, they are complex, they are legal texts covering a wide range of objectives. There are concerns that how WTO has a bearing with respect to the sovereignty of respective nation states also. The new international economic order has always called for reform. Now, today when there are question marks raised on the structure and working of WTO, the biasness with respect to trade agenda, democratic deficit, transparency amongst others, the ideas that NIEO always stood for, the principle and the tenets of a just international economic order are all the more relevant with respect to working of global governance mechanisms like WTO also. So, what we see here is, dear learners, that issues of international trade from distance, diversity, transport and communication, risk, uncertainty, lack of information, import, export restrictions. The concerns of the developing world are all the more peculiar. The concerns of the poor nations are all the more problematized with respect to transport, communications, information, uncertainties, restrictions amongst others. So, in such a scenario, there are question marks that have been raised that has globalization done more bad than good, because above all when you are using economics as a model for promoting profits only, whereas the neglect of welfare of human beings has been given on the back burner. Late Deen Dayal Upadhyay ji ideas on economic activity was that economics must be a means for developing the faculties and skills of human beings. Mahatma Gandhi ji also gave the concept of Swadeshi, which was the perspective of economic reconstruction of the society, namely using their own products. So, in such sense, what is essential here to be factored in, that reform is the need of the hour. One must ensure that rules of international trade are not just employed to protect the rich, are not just employed to work for the advantage of the few. There is a need to intervene to correct the working, the operations, the mechanisms, and new international economic order, this call for reforming existing international economic order because it was unjust. So, there is a necessity to create a new and healthy international economic order based on justice and cooperation. These ideas, these principles of NIEO are of timeless significance. Time and again, the call for international economic relations based on justice and cooperation have been raised at various international forums, and NIEO has been the voice, the significant idea for ensuring that existing economic order must be reformed in order to ensure equity, inclusivity, justice for everyone. Dear learners, we hope that the lecture on new international economic order gave you significant inputs and insights. We look forward to positive, encouraging feedback from you all. Thank you very much for being with us.